Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. Today is a much bigger stream than I expected, but hey, that's great. We don't get leaks of the size of the current one quite often. Plasma Void already pointing out in chat, Mark about to analyze schematics and specs. Yeah, it's gonna get pretty nerdy, though I'm not gonna be like analyzing like the square millimeter die size. I'll just rely on statements from the original leak saying it's like, well, it's very comparable to the A19 Pro, for example. But that's already me telling you way too much. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today is a big day for us on Mark Tech, and hopefully, we'll keep on exploring the topics of today in future subsequent videos. And of course, it's going to be very interesting to see what those leaks turn out to be in the real world once the iPhone 18 comes out, once we have die breakdowns and performance analysis of the A20 Pro chip, other Apple 2 nanometer processors, checking what exact RAM specifications they run and things like that. So we have quite a lot. These leaks come from Tata Electronics, a company I don't often think about, but if we go here, you'll find that this is an Indian company. It's basically a manufacturing partner for Apple. Apple has obviously started assembling much more of their tech in India and Vietnam. They need regional partners. Some of it is being manufactured by Foxconn still. There are other Chinese companies that also operate in other countries, but Tata Electronics is an Indian company that operates in India. And obviously, having more partners, having fresh partners, having partners that might not be as used to working with a giant company like Apple, or a company with the secrecy level of Apple, or a company of the importance level of Apple, which means that they're much more likely that people want to leak their shit, well, that comes with some inherent risks. And this is why I'll be a little bit careful in how I cover all of this. Basically, this is a cyber attack against Tata Electronics. And with that also comes now information about Apple that's being leaked. That information first is making its way to the dark web because of its illegal nature. Nobody wants to host basically the original stolen documents, but multiple other sources have now started repeating that information, even reposting photos and videos from that stuff. And multiple insiders and analysts have confirmed that the data is pretty authentic, that basically it bears Apple specific watermarks for security reasons to identify them if they happen to leak. And that's pretty much what's happening here, right? So Apple, I was not involved in the cyber attack in any way, and I promised to never be. Neither did I post something that came from the dark web. The only way I'm analyzing this is as a tertiary analyst, if not one on the fourth or fifth level. So I'm basically telling you stuff that has been re-reported in multiple instances, whether it's through bigger channels like 95Mac, Mac Rumors, right, or smaller individual YouTube leakers and stuff like specifically Twitter leakers. Let's be honest. Twitter leakers don't care about the law. Twitter doesn't care about the law. So, yeah. And obviously, Apple has already started cracking down on much of it. So I'm not sure, even now that all the websites have reloaded, I'm not sure if all the videos and photos will be right there. Some of the stuff, again, is on Twitter, which hopefully means that it will stay there for a little longer. I should have saved more of it. I honestly did not expect, I didn't quite fathom how important of a leak this is, how much was actually included. So when on my short break at work, I was actually going through some of it and just setting up some links for my reading list so I can go through them with you. I did not actually save the websites, all the photos, just enough for my thumbnail. So if you guys have something that I am gonna miss because like maybe the websites will start deleting it right as I'm covering it. Let me know in the comment section. Let me know live. Let me also know afterwards. And of course, you can follow my Discord, follow me on Twitter, and let's exchange information over there. As well. I've already posted some of the most important leaks on the Discord, so if that interests you, go over there and help us grow the community. That goes a long way to support us. Obviously, yes, Apple is now cracking down on it, and in fact, the leaker that we thought was the leaker turned out to not be the leaker. So this is very much a big drama thing, but what we obviously care about is the actual information, whether or not it was even Blas. To be honest, I do not know much about him either way. It seems like it wasn't him. So whoever basically was posting under Eve Leaks was not him. And well, that's also what I would be saying if it was me, because I wouldn't want to inspire Apple's hatred and vitriol against me and obviously Apple's legal team. But that being said, in this case, it also seems believable that it isn't actually him, because that would be very careless of one individual. I also see Riley in the chat saying, hello, I'm here early this time. I saw you early. Thank you so much for joining. Guys, with all that intro babbling out of the way, we're going to get right into it. But before we do this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, share the video out with anybody else who might enjoy it as well, and comment. I love getting your agreements, your suggestions, anything else, or your disagreements in the live chat. Just getting your opinions, your state of mind. It helps me be more reactive to what you want and what you like, and it just also entertains me as well, right? So we're helping out each other in that way. And of course, please like the video afterwards once it becomes a VOD. That helps a lot with the algorithm. If you want to support me directly, you can make your live chat a super chat or super sticker as a small donation, goes a long way. Or you can become a supporter right here on YouTube. Shout out to our MarkTech Pro and MarkTech Pro Max supporters, Steve, Angelica, Max, Maximus, Jonathan, and Denise. And hell, for the love of it, shout out to our MarkTech Neo supporter, KSB Wonders. You'll find all of that in the description of the channel, how to support the channel, including also you'll find the same tiers on Patreon. If you want to support me, a little bit more money finds the way from Patreon to me than from YouTube members, but I know YouTube members is easier for most people to do. With all of that now out of the way, and with me having given more than sufficient context for the leak, again, it is now finding its way to official stuff through the dark web, essentially. We do not know who is individually responsible, either for the cyber attack or for most of the repostings, but obviously we now have quite a lot. And let's get to that. Well, first is that we actually got a very comprehensive amount of data. So it's hundreds of gigabytes that have been leaked. And what's interesting is it does not just include schematics, basically photos, basically PDFs or something like that. It actually goes much further and includes stuff like video. And obviously video is great because video does not just show you video-specific information. Like, for example, here we see a drop test for the upcoming iPhone 18 Pro. In fact, it shows us way more thanks to being a video. It shows us the color of the iPhone 18 Pro, which, as you can see, is actually a gray silver tone. And one thing that stands out is that the back is not white as it is on the iPhone 17 Pro series. In fact, I think that was one of the decisions for the iPhone 17 Pro's back design that people liked the least, that the color between the aluminum and the glass were not that well matched. In my opinion, that works on the orange and the dark blue because you kind of get more interesting takes on the actual color. But on a gray tone that isn't really a color, going from gray to white, I understand why Apple did it, because basically all gray iPhones, all silver iPhones in the past happen to have a white back. Obviously not including space gray, because space gray is kind of like Apple's pre-step to black rather than to silver. So we already have now one piece of information that's been leaked. And of course, if you look at it, we also have now drop test video. Now, should you really take them for much? No, because look, we don't know what the exact material is that it's falling on. We just see that it's shiny and reflective. So could it be glass? Could it be highly polished steel? It doesn't really even matter, because also with drop tests, it really depends on the angle that's dropping. Obviously, it depends from the height that's dropping. And even if we know those exact things, there is also always just a probability when it comes to drop tests. When you remember the Apple channel, Apple Focus channel, Everything Apple Pro, right? You'll remember he used to do a ton of drop tests, but the drop test would sometimes show vastly different results. Chilling with Tech saying hi, just got some groceries, dropping a like at this, by the way. Well, thank you very much. It's hot in New Jersey. Well, it's been really hot here in Europe. We hit 41 degrees on the weekend. That's in Celsius. You're free to translate it to Fahrenheit, if that helps. Breaking multiple heat records in countries like France, parts of Europe being hotter than the Sahara Desert. And that's, by the way, in cities where heat is actually being stored longer because of asphalt and tall buildings and stuff like that. So, and obviously in Europe, in Central Europe, where we have where we are notorious for not being all too well equipped when it comes to air conditioners. So yes, it was quite hot. It's still very warm today, but nice actually. And then tomorrow it's noticeably cooling down, and we'll have like a week of rain and stuff like that. Are we getting a second gen vapor chamber type tech for the iPhone 18 Pro? It's bigger. We're gonna get to that. Does that help the light circles? Oh, yes. Well, when it comes to basically lens reflections or lens glare, whatever, right, on the iPhones, it seems like, however, Apple has been constructing its cameras for quite some time. They've been quite susceptible to lens flare, or like reflections, I guess, like of lights. And the issue with that, obviously, is you don't want that, right? If you're focusing on like a street lamp at night, you don't want that street lamp to show up like another 5 times in your video, but like as ghosty after effects. Now, Apple has, and obviously you want that even less in a still photo, but from everything that we have heard, no changes are specific to eliminating lens flare, reflections, and things like that. But it is a noticeably different optical system. It's bigger, it has variable aperture capabilities. This specifically isn't fixing that, but we don't know if the entire assembly is just going to be so different that it might fix it, not as a side effect, but Apple is working on that simultaneously, but that's just not as much of a focus. It is absolutely solvable, but don't forget, these are very small solutions relative. Like I would argue Google Pixel and Samsung do a better job at eliminating those things, but then those cameras have other downsides. So with physics, I would argue it's basically impossible to entirely eliminate them, especially on such a small apparatus. But we also know that Apple is using different lens systems, using more lenses, using fewer plastic lenses. So I'm not sure how that will change over time. We know that Apple has advertised it sometimes when a new camera generation comes around, that they've actually improved upon that. But the improvements have always, this is always one of the things whenever Apple advertises it, where I actually say take it with a grain of salt. Usually when it comes to benchmarks and certain promises, I'm quite optimistic about what Apple says because I know that Apple fears stuff like class action lawsuit for misleading advertisements and stuff like that. But when it comes to reducing lens flares, reflections, and things like that, it seems like Apple has struggled more than many others, but they've also excelled in many ways over others. Like, for example, they had an f1.5 aperture back then on the iPhone 13 Pro. They've done quite great with image stabilization, being one of the few companies to use sensor shift image stabilization rather than a lens-based stabilizer. So there is a lot that Apple has done overall, but it seems like that one is seemingly a hurdle for them. Um, yeah. Well, I don't know. Like Samsung is not the greatest at sound, I would argue. Like saying you want an AirPods Max from Samsung, like to me, I would much prefer like a specific chip, let's say from Qualcomm, but it's built with Google, and it's basically all in on Android integration, on the latest high quality Bluetooth codec, maybe even some kind of Wi-Fi compatibility, and then whatever Samsung makes a pair of headphones with that chip, with that compatibility software, but then 10 times better than that to me is Bose doing that, Sony doing that, and lending their audio expertise to a chip. And for Apple, what's great is that over the last couple of years, two of their biggest strengths have been audio expertise and most notably chip expertise. So I don't think that Samsung doing AirPods Max would have even Apple's success with AirPods Max is very limited. So Samsung in this market would really not succeed too well, not with people trusting established brands like Sony way too much. Don't forget, Samsung tried making a HomePod. Do I have to remind you of that? Samsung HomePod Compet. If I remember the English language today, it's been a long day. Right? Do you remember that tripod kind of? Yeah, Samsung tried, but obviously realized that it would have no meaningful place in the market and essentially just scrapped it. But whatever. Yeah. Let me continue, guys. So the crackdown, massive Tata bridge. The leak footage has already caught the attention of prominent leakers, with tipster Ellen Bass sharing the drop test videos. But again, we've already talked about it being not him. According to Reuters, the leaked files carried Apple's confidential watermarks and internal code name. So this is basically them just going into detail into everything that I already said up front. We do not need to analyze the leak itself. We can analyze here just the actual content. We also see a drop test here for the front. Oh, I actually think I know why they're doing this on this highly polished surface. It's so that they can actually see much better where the phone might crash. So even like a split second before it lands, in theory, you can gain from the reflections how it falls. Now, obviously, you can control the fall with how the phone is set up on this apparatus, which obviously is height adjustable, but also angle adjustable. One thing that also I like is that the speaker system here seems to be fully symmetrical, which doesn't actually mean that it's going to have two speakers on the bottom. This is just visually. One side is going to be the speaker, one just going to have a microphone there. But it does look a little bit more balanced to me than on my 17 Pro. I might have to take a look if it's like that on the 17 Pro, if it's a little bit more balanced. Yeah, obviously, again, we are not here to actually analyze the drop test resilience, but what we are seeing here is, I would argue that these cameras are protruding a little bit more than what they do from the iPhone 17 Pro Max that I have. That obviously would go in line with more recent rumors. If you remember old leaks, they said that the iPhone 18 Pro would actually get thicker overall over the 17 Pro. But more recent ones have pointed out that the chassis, the main portion, is going to be basically exactly the same, but the plateau and then the cameras on top of the plateau are going to be just a hair bit thicker, suggesting specifically changes to the camera system. And with that, also inside, don't forget, there's a ton of other components. This is why Apple made the plateau. Like, you can find the parts of the main chip here, and the start of the vapor chamber cooling system, right? So yeah, it makes sense for Apple to increase that size, because you know how money is fungible, right? If you give somebody $100, but you tell them, like, guy, please don't get drunk on those $100, and that person will be, I swear I won't buy a single drink with that money, or something like that, right? But they already had $20, right? $20 that they would have kind of had to spend on food or shelter or whatever, right? Because obviously a drink wouldn't necessarily get them through the night. But now they have $100, or let's say even just another extra $20. So they swore to you that they will not use those $20 for drink, but now their own $20 are freed up because they can use now your $20 or $100 for food, shelter, whatever, right? Obviously, with today's inflation, $20 is not going to be enough. The same thing goes obviously for device size, right? Now, Apple might not have increased the thickness of the part of the chassis where your battery sits or where your speakers sit, right? But Apple has now created more space around where your chip sits, where your main antenna sits, where parts of the vapor chamber sit, right? So, and the more, which allows them to pack more of those components up there, and that frees up more space down here without actually having to make this portion of the device thicker or heavier. And that is how we can get a small increase in battery capacity from around 5,000 to somewhere close to 5,200 milliampere hour batteries. Again, exact exact specs will vary based on whether you have the SIM card tray model or the SIM card tray free model. But yes, so, and then the year after, we are rumored to be getting big redesign, 6,000 plus milliampere hour batteries, but don't expect leaps in those aspects this year. So this is what we get just in terms of videos. There might be more. Again, you can let me know whether it's in comments right now or when you're watching the video afterwards. With that, also, we are getting way more than that. One part is that we see a potential burgundy color. Seemingly depicting a cherry red iPhone. Sorry. So it's vice versa. This was the older burgundy color, which honestly doesn't look very burgundy to me. This is very probably with a lot of very bright lights around it. So this is just weird lighting with, like, obviously this isn't cherry, but this doesn't really look that burgundy to me. So there's probably a lot of burgundy color. Right. I mean, it's darkish burgundy. Yeah. But burgundy, unfortunately, burgundy, depending on how you implement it, it can look very old-fashioned in a way. This one I actually like, which I usually see it more like this, which is interesting. And apparently I can differentiate those colors. So I'm a tiny bit colorblind, but apparently not so much. So let's continue here. So this was the older burgundy color referenced in many leaks. If you remember, for example, the MaxTech guys were quite obsessed with a potential burgundy or even copper-like color, right? But obviously that one wasn't copper. So it seems like whatever parts of those leaks, I would suspect that Apple just tested a lot of different colors, many different colors, and then ultimately decided on what is now dark cherry. I think that the cherry color, which now is probably the actual, well, that's probably an actual leak now for a final product rather than for a prototype. I think this one will sell better just because it feels more red. Like nobody's gonna be differentiating between pink or salmon or lilac or purple, right? Or burgundy. No, dark cherry is actually red. It is a very specific hue of red, but it does make sense. When you look at the burgundy color, wait, did they mistype burgundy? Or did they mistype burgundy? No, I actually put it correctly because they wrote it as a burgundy. That's funny. Yeah. So, but again, I don't think that this specific photo does a great job of showing off that color. It looks a little bit too, I would almost say pinkish, but that's again because of the bright white lights next to it. Burgundy reminds me of the interior of American cars during the 70s. Yes, but that's exactly, that's so true. It's like burgundy is such a classic color for exactly that. Cars, wallets, everything that was like leather, but not that classic brown leather. You know, that's like saddle brown, right? I think it's saddle brown. Yeah, so this is a very typical color for leather, for example, right? But burgundy, and mind you, I mean with that this burgundy rather than this burgundy, right? That one always felt like a close second. It's something that people in the 70s who at that point were like 20, which means they actually were born in like the 50s, right? That's something that that generation really grew up with. And then the generation after that, who were in their 20s, then in the 90s, like their kids, they still had a lot of that stuff, right? Because they might have gotten their car from their parents and stuff like that. But then for my generation, and even the generation like between those people and me, like this is where it really started to go out of fashion. So yeah, I totally agree, Ziggy, here. Sorry, you cannot believe how much water I lost. But you know what gained the water? By the way, guys, if you want to support me financially, I have a really good reason for you to consider doing that today. Guess who had their iPhone 17 Pro Max replaced? I'm not even gonna say repaired, because my iPhone 17 Pro Max did suffer water damage, which means that I have to now get it repaired for half the cost of the product. Yeah, so I might be dehydrated, but my iPhone, especially its SIM card tray, definitely was not dehydrated. I wish it had happened closer to September and I would not have to repair it or replace it, or I would just wait until the iPhone 18 series. But I'm not gonna wait 2.5 months. Plus, I also expect the new products to be 10-20% more expensive, especially since the euro has actually significantly weakened recently. So I expect euro prices to actually not be very good, like another 5% or so. Yeah, so it made more sense to replace my product. Look up Chevy Caprice with burgundy interior. Okay. Chevy Caprice, burgundy interior. Oh yeah, that's such a classic look. I think my grandparents would totally dig that. I also remember a lot of the style was from a lot of what I saw was like this kind of reddish leaning interior, whether it's this probably this kind of burgundy, but with like a green car, like a dark green paint job, right? It's absolutely gaudy. Like nobody today would really do something like that. But yeah, this is a very classic look, unfortunately. And I understand why Apple moved. I remember there was a burgundy 3DS, right? The launch edition model. Um, Yeah, and that people were like left and right complaining that it looks too old in that regard. So I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying there isn't a way to do burgundy that doesn't look good. Obviously, I think that Apple is probably one of the few companies who would be able to do that. I mean, Apple managed to market the fuck out of Cosmic Orange, but I do understand why they probably, like, because there is no big redesign for the 18 Pro series, it made more sense to focus on big colors, like impactful colors, but not ones that are going to be controversial, right? Having essentially a blue and a red model in addition to silver and black is going to go a long way to just help people say, look, yes, the redesign was last year. Maybe there's a redesign coming next year, but I'll still get this device because it comes in a really nice color and my contract is just up for renewal. Yeah. But also, like, if you want a kind of burgundy color, right? There are ways to achieve that, right? You can get like a leather case in that color, so it's not like you're gonna be completely screwed if like burgundy happens to be your favorite color or something like that. Yeah. Over in their Discord channel, the leakers also shared a close-up of the purported cherry red color. This is way too much data. It's just lost in compression for this image, and from the angle that's taken, obviously you even have like these light flimmering artifacts on the camera. What we definitely see is that the camera plateau still has the same shape, like even the hard edge up front. Like, a lot of people obviously complain that it's very easy to scuff this up. So Apple might have used a thicker anodization layer to offset that, but one thing they clearly didn't do is soften this edge. So if you're somebody who was very worried about durability on your iPhone 18 series, that's something for you to consider. Again, I've reacted to the jerry-rig everything videos on it. I don't think it's an issue. It wasn't an issue on my iPhone 17 Pro Max. What broke it was something very different in the end, but just giving you all the details. There's also a black color iPhone 18 Pro. Again, black is always like, especially on aluminum, right? This could be space gray, in my opinion. I could see Apple doing like silver, calling the colors basically silver, space gray, dark cherry, and then bright blue or something like that. Ziggy leaving a very generous $10. Electronics are expensive. Add to electronics upgrade savings. Well, thank you so much, Ziggy. One of the most generous donations we've had for a while here on this channel. I know my live stream schedule is quite erratic, and I apologize for that, especially to those who support me long term by becoming a channel member here. But even if you leave a donation, that goes a long way to help me. And yes, obviously, this means a lot to me. And now, guys, you see how it's done. If you can find it in your heart and your wallet to support me, just like Ziggy did, you see how it's done, and you can do the same. I do not set up like live stream goals. Sometimes I might do that for like a birthday or for like an experiment, but just usually I just rely on your generosity, and just experiencing it just makes me happy. Thank you very much, Ziggy, and thank you to everyone else as well. Just watching, creating an atmosphere that makes me want to keep doing this. So one thing that actually stands out here to me with this image is actually the zoom camera. Now, I cannot tell you too much about the main camera. It does look different to me than the one on the iPhone 17 Pro. But one thing that sticks out to me about the zoom, the telephoto camera here, is that it really seems like the opening, the aperture here technically, is way wider than on the 17 Pro. I think the 17 Pro has like an aperture of f2.4 or f2.8. iPhone 17 Pro tech specs. So we go to the camera. 48 megapixel telephoto with f2.8 aperture, right? Don't forget, the smaller the second number, the larger the aperture is, because this is basically division, right? And the smaller the number that you divide by, the larger your end result. This would suggest to me that we are looking at least at like an f2.4 aperture, maybe even something wider. I do not see much change, if any, to be honest. Jesus Christ, I opened up so many websites because my Safari crashed. I do not see much change. Wait, I think this is the ultra wide, this is the main camera, and this is the telephoto, right? Am I correct in that one? Can somebody correct me, please, if I'm wrong? Now, on the main camera, the apertures already have 1.8. It's probably gonna hard to see a difference between like a variable f1.4 to 1.8 and just a regular f1.78 or something like that. There's also a possibility that depending on what setting the main camera is set to, it might actually look worse in a way, because there is a chance that it could have a narrower aperture, right, when set to that setting. For example, an f2 or f2.4 aperture would make the background, give it a nice bokeh depth of field, would focus much more on your subject for like an interesting portrait photo, right? But you would only use that if you have good lighting conditions and you don't want the widest possible aperture to let in as much light onto the sensor as possible. Obviously, with the zoom camera, where you start with already, not only do you start with a worse aperture, right, f2.8 versus f1.8, or I'm not gonna say worse or better, but it's definitively just worse for low light conditions. But you also start with a much smaller sensor. This is a 1/1.28 inch sensor, and this is a 1/2.5 inch sensor, right? So literally on the diagonal, one is twice as big as the other, right? And that obviously in the real world means it's way worse when you just look at the overall size of the sensor, right? So this has like 3 to 4 times less light to work with, right? Worse aperture, worse sensor. And Apple is obviously improving on that. Now, there are rumors that Apple isn't really changing up the sensors too much, that might have to wait for next year, that Apple is waiting for a new kind of sensor, a new generation of sensors that handle HDR significantly better. But we do not have any exact numbers on that, to be honest, whether we are actually sticking with last gen sensors or whether we are getting some kind of smaller refresh. Sometimes that happens. A sensor might be the same physical size and stuff like that, but it might have faster readouts, something for better video capture and stuff like that. It might work better with the stabilization system. It might handle HDR a bit better, but overall, it seems like we are mostly in the ballpark of using roughly the same sensors as before, but with a variable aperture, including a wider aperture on the main camera, but then also, because it's variable, also one more suited for stuff like portraits, and a massively wider but not variable aperture on the telephoto camera to drastically increase its low light performance. The iPhone 18 Pro series was also rumored to feature a smaller dynamic island, and this image shared by early Apple leaks in their Discord channel adds weight to the rumor. I've also posted the link to this stream on the early Apple leaks Discord. Yep, this basically proves exactly what we've suspected, that the dynamic island is like 33% less wide. yeah, that just makes sense to me. The front speaker looks similar to how it does now. The bezels look roughly identical to the iPhone 17 Pro series. Again, this also makes sense because none of those changes, like in the form factor, were rumored for this gen. Supposedly, we are getting a big overwork of the iPhone design next year. But hey, I'll take a smaller dynamic island. Other files from the data leak corroborate the smaller dynamic island, as the infrared flutter is said to be mounted under the display on the side. Yeah, this is basically what enables this. This is also why we got that leak a while ago, where apparently some leaker didn't understand the actual hardware makeup of the iPhone 18 Pro series, and they believe that this would actually be the camera, right? Zuboito joined the stream. Hi, I believe you have been here recently, but you haven't been overall here all too much in the last time, so thank you so much. So the infrared flutter is here. That one is going to be invisible for you. That one just sits under the screen. I'm not sure if Apple might need to turn parts of the screen black where this is, or whenever they're using Face ID. So maybe they'll make the dynamic island in software pretty big in those moments. Yeah, Zuboito, I managed to catch you live for second time in a row. Yeah, we're traveling a lot. Well, yeah, you guys know, I tell you that all the time. Some of the best supporters of the channel are people who can almost never watch live, or they're even busy while watching live, and they will send like a short message, or sometimes a small super chat or something like that. That's enough for me. Like, don't get me wrong, I want your messages, I want your agreements, disagreements, your takes, I want your money. But I'm just really grateful to have you guys here, and whenever you can, write a comment, let me know what you actually want to see me cover, help me be a better YouTuber based on that. That goes a long way to, I hope, making these streams more interactive for you, but also they help me because they tell me what you like, and that's obviously what we are doing here, right? I mean, it's kind of like being intimate with each other, right? Like, you kind of want to make it nice for the partner, at least if you're not a complete fucking asshole. Overtook new position and company. Congratulations. I hope it's a higher position, right? You know how it's like that meme of like accidentally became important at work. I doubt it will be accidental for you, so congratulations. But usually I have time to catch restream, I know. But this is why I also tell you guys, when you are watching a restream or the videos as a video on demand, please leave a comment. Just a small thumbs up or a hi, I was actually there, helps a lot. Like, it literally sometimes just like 5 to 10 comments more will sometimes correlate to double the views. The algorithm is that fucking weird. This is why I also beg you guys in the Discord to do that. I promise you, I'm not just doing it on a whim. And guys, because we have more people right now here than likes, please leave a likes. I promise you it helps. But let's continue, because in addition to having general iPhone 18 leaks, or 18 Pro more specifically, I do suspect we're also going to get more leaks in the days to come as all of this gets analyzed. Specifically, it seems like the first wave really focused on the iPhone 18 Pro. There's also seemingly some iPad mini leaking, but I'm not quite sure how realistic that is, because all I saw was like an image of the main board that was seemingly AI generated, and they got wrong by saying it's an A20 approach by saying it's an A20 chip, but then correcting it to saying it's an A20 Pro. So I will focus on the stuff that seems most believable right now. Zboito saying crazy. Okay, I'll toast your comments and likes. Well, thank you, good sir. Again, this is why I tell you this, guys. It's not that I'm obsessed with the like counter. Believe me, guys, I interact with sometimes people who literally die in my freaking arms, right? I do have enough of an ego to sustain myself without likes here, right? The reason why I tell you to like the video, to write comments and everything, it's because it actually really helps, and that grows the community, that makes the streams larger, makes them more interesting for me, and ultimately better for you as well. But let's get to the actually big stuff here. Schematics related to the motherboard. So obviously we now have the overall design, we have the camera plateau, we even discussed potential camera specs based on what we even see inside the actual camera rings. We see Face ID not just being smaller, but we're also seeing the internal components that allow Face ID to be visually smaller than before by moving the infrared flutter to the side of the device and by moving it under the screen, effectively resulting in a smaller cutout in the center. But when it comes to the leaks, I think the most interesting part are actually the leaks concerning the motherboard, or as Apple calls it, the main board. This is a huge change, and it comes with multiple other big changes because Apple is switching from TSMC's N3P node on the A19 Pro chip to TSMC's first generation 2nm node. That's N2. It's not called N2B or like we had N3B before N3E or something like that, but it is the node before TSMC's N2P node, which we actually talked already about when we covered that AMD, Intel, Qualcomm, MediaTek, and seemingly even Apple are planning to implement it late 2026 to early 2027. In fact, we already heard from Mark Gurman that the M7 chip is going to follow up the M6 processor very quickly in 2027, and then it's going to implement N2P over N2, which is going to power the M6, the A20, the A20 Pro chips, and stuff like that. But before we get into other people analyzing the actual leak, let's actually see what the original source had to say about this, because this is Ice Universe posting on Weibo. Obviously, Chinese platforms are much more forgiving of confidential information being posted like this. The core meaning of the revelation that we are discussing here, this is being translated from Ice Universe's tweet, is that the A20 Pro of the iPhone 18 Pro and Pro Max may not only be a conventional chip upgrade, but also focus on packaging, memory, heat dissipation, and I would argue architecturally the NPU. Now, I would argue just improving a part of the chip is a conventional chip upgrade, but I do understand what they mean. There seemingly is a different relation between the NPU and the rest of the chip. It seemingly takes up a larger percentage of the die, which seems that Apple is fully committing to really fast AI on the device. And unlike some people who suspected that the M6 and A20 generation might actually deprioritize the NPU, because don't forget, we just got a massive boost to AI acceleration on the GPU with the M5 and the A19 generation by getting neural accelerators directly on the GPU. But seemingly Apple is not giving up on the NPU. The NPU is very likely getting, and this is a little bit speculation here, but Mark Gurman has said that the NPU is getting much better, and that lines up with it being partially much bigger. I think the NPU is getting hardware accelerated FP4, FP8, and maybe even FP4, right? Because right now, all of Apple's architectures in terms of hardware acceleration max out at FP16. Technically, Apple has basically kind of dual issue FP16 in a way. It's hard to put it in exact teraflops sometimes, but Apple, the reason why you will sometimes see why the latest neural accelerators or latest neural engines from the likes of Qualcomm or even AMD or Intel, they might give you a higher teraops number, right? More trillions operations per second. The reason for that that is because they do hardware support FP8 or even FP4. This is why even with technically less compute, they can give you a higher TOPS number, even if that doesn't actually mean that in most tasks it will be that much faster. In many ways, it will be also limited by stuff like memory bandwidth and obviously RAM capacity when we're looking at those mobile chips. So Apple's NPU is not behind the others because it doesn't have FP8. FP16, Apple does quite well with it. But a larger NPU, an NPU inside the 2nm chip, a 2nm chip that has way faster memory solution, right? With WMCM being also lower latency and everything, that could be a massive improvement to how Apple handles AI locally. Okay. First, the WMCM package is the focus. Before we get into this, let's actually Google WMCM because it has been a while since we analyzed it. We can actually ask Google here. Thank you, Google, of course, for giving me a German result, even though everything on my freaking devices is set to English. Oh, wow. Okay, so that doesn't help either. WMCM most commonly refers to wafer level multi-chip module and advanced semiconductor packaging technology. Why do we need, or the faculty of medicine? Okay, yeah, we don't need the faculty of medicine here. Okay, semiconductors. It is obviously from TSMC's. It integrates multiple dies such as processors and memory. In this case, we don't even need to talk about using two processors that are combined with WMCM. That's not what WMCM is for. It's not a competitor to CoWoS, right? CoWoS being that high-end solution that is used on like server chips and stuff like that. Nor is it quite the 2.5D stacking technology that Apple uses, for example, for the M5 Pro and M5 Max chips, right? But one thing that WMCM here does, in contrary to many other solutions that are currently being built, is that allows these chips, those modules, whether we are looking at the... Wait, why can't I just scroll? What's happening? Okay, weird. That was a bug with my Logitech mouse. It allows these components to not just stack on top of each other, which actually has great benefits in a lot of scenarios because that's technically the lowest latency solution you can have. However, if you stack components on top of each other, that creates a lot of heat trapping, right? And that's great if you can deal with that heat in like a system that has active cooling or water cooling, or it's a giant server farm with like tons and tons of, literally tons of airflow on top of it, right? That is not going to be the case even with a generous vapor chamber, which is something we are going to get to later. It's not something that's going to be very realistic on a smartphone, right? Benefits by placing chips laterally, it significantly reduces thickness. That's, again, also something, again, stacking chips on top of each other, it's great. Again, low latency, maximum bandwidth communication if you really build like the interposer very wide and everything. That's all great. But in a smartphone where you're limited in how much heat you can not evaporate, but basically put back into the environment, and you're also limited by thickness, not just by, obviously, no matter how thick you make two layers of chips, they will fit into the device. But then you have to think about the cooling system on top of it, the vapor chamber, the glass on the other side, that the screen that also needs its own cooling, by the way. And then, of course, the metal and glass on the other side, the sandwiching part of the device. Yeah, which means that while it's not really prohibitive industrially in terms of thickness, but if you can go WMCM and place them laterally, that's already great. Right, stabilizes performance for heavy tasks like AI processing. That also now goes into that area because Again, maybe stacking on top of each other might be the most efficient solution, right? As for example, as AMD does with its X3D processors. But specifically the fact that you can now dissipate the heat from two areas rather than having those dies actually kind of breathing onto each other is a massive gain for, especially for a very heat-constrained device like an iPhone in that regard. I wonder, what are they exactly linking to here? Visual. Yeah, and it should be noted that this is a technology that's specifically coming out with alongside TSMC's 2 nanometer. Because obviously 2 nanometer is a better node than 3 nanometer. It's more dense, not just for the actual logic part of the die, but also for the cache. If you guys remember in prior streams, I talked about how 5 nanometer did not actually increase the density of the cache, right? Which means if you actually want more cache, you literally always have to just make the die bigger. Even if you start at 7 nanometer and you move all the way down to N4P, there is no increase in cache density. So if you want a chip with more cache, you just have to make it larger, or you have to rely on density improvements on the logic to then use that one space to add to the cache. 2 nanometer is actually finally increasing cache density by 10 to 15%, and seemingly there's a path forward with both N2P and A14 to also keep improving on that, but they also need more because the gains between the individual nodes are getting smaller. So we are not just fighting for smaller and smaller transistors. Sorry, my skin really itches here. So if you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm just sometimes scratching my hand. But we are improving the packaging. One thing that will happen with A14 and A16 is we're going to also be able to have backside power delivery. But that will require different motherboards at that point, and it's not yet happening with either N2 or N2P. But other packaging technologies, not that backside power delivery is strictly a packaging technology, but you guys know what I'm getting at. But WMCM has emerged as a key focus in advanced packaging. Right, and there is a lot of nerdy stuff here, and you can already see that many are saying that basically WMCM right now is kind of entirely focused towards Apple. We know that, for example, 2 nanometer is 50% or more bought up by Apple, right? And N2P actually happens to be very Apple light right now because its first customers seem to be companies like AMD and Qualcomm. But with the launch of 2 nanometer, Apple is also going to be the first customer of WMCM from TSMC. Apple's previously adopted info technology faces limitations in I/O count between application processors, and DRAM performance under info packaging is approaching its limits. The core advantage of WMCM lies in its ability to directly integrate multiple functional dies such as CPU, GPU, and high-speed memory. Again, in this case, CPU, GPU, NPU, they will still be on a monolithic die with the A20 Pro chip, but in future generations, Apple could conceivably separate the CPU and GPU portion just as they did on the M5 Pro and M5 Max chip. But for the A20 Pro, we are looking at using that for high-speed memory at the wafer level with high density and precision, thereby enhancing overall chip performance. What is WMCM? It's an advanced packaging technology developed by TSMC regarded as an upgraded architecture of info POP, or integrated fan-out package on package. Unlike traditional single-chip packaging, where wafers are first diced into individual dies and then packaged and soldered onto printed circuit boards, the core concept of WMCM is to complete packaging at the wafer stage, effectively combining wafer-level packaging with heterogeneous multi-die integration integration. This basically means that you can now combine vastly different components, not only ones like even because RAM is very different, obviously, from the A20 Pro die itself, but it also allows you to use multiple different dies for this stuff like CPU and GPU, and that doesn't mean even that the dies have to be on the same node, right? You can have a CPU die that's 2 nanometer, but a GPU die that's 3 nanometer. And if you really wanted to throw more into the ring, you could use a 4 nanometer die just as a RAM controller, because that is actually notoriously difficult to scale down with smaller nodes. So using a smaller node might actually just be wasted money. So it does help in that regard, also with cost efficiency. Technically, it still belongs to the integrated fan-out architecture and is structurally similarly to CoWoS R, chip on wafer substrate with RDL. So, but it is way cheaper than some of the more extreme implementation of CoWoS. Its key feature is the lateral integration of multiple dies, such as AP processors, LPDDR memory. You can already see, even from the article, it's very much focused on lower power components, where we're looking at CoWoS, we are looking at like server grade components and passive components into a single package at the vapor stage, which is then diced into individual chips. However, unlike CoWoS, WMCM eliminates the need for substrates or silicon interposers. That's correct. I shouldn't have said that the interposer is changed. It's the interconnection between the chips. Instead, chips are embedded directly into molded resin and interconnected via redistribution layers, RDL, similar to CoWoS R, enabling horizontal signal transmission at the wafer level. So again, very important, horizontal level, chips side by side, not on top of each other, and different chips are possible to be used here. Guys, if you want to sometimes have me respond to a specific comment, I highly recommend making that comment into a super chat. I will not respond to every single question, especially if the live chat is more lively, because that will be distracting for everyone. If your question is a little bit disconnected, like Chilling with Tech, you were asking about the Pro tablet from Google. To be honest, I do not just trust Google with tech, right, with hardware. So my suggestion for Google is to fucking get out of the Pixel hardware business, focus again on like a Nexus-like cooperation with the likes of Samsung, previously LG, or even some Chinese manufacturers to make it cheaper, lend their camera expertise to other companies, help them with better drivers and better integration. I'll just be honest, in the last few years, I have not cared basically at all about Pixels from a hardware perspective. Sometimes I like their software, but that's really not enough to offset certain shortcomings that they have. I'm not extracting here money from you guys. This is just the nature of the business. Some comments, they just do not fit into the main discussion of the day. So if you want me to read them out and analyze them for a bit, make that into a small donation, and that helps a lot. If you don't deem it important enough for that, then maybe just comment something else, right? Okay. Let's get to the post. First, the WMCM package is the focus, and obviously now we have a bit of a technical background for that. In the past, the common idea of Apple A series is that DRAM is closer to SoC and even has a similar stack close package design, with them literally being on top of each other and similar in size and shape. The advantages are short distance, low power consumption, and low delay here referring to low latency. But the disadvantages are also obvious. CPU, GPU, NPU, and DRAM heat sources are too close and literally heated between them if we're talking of RAM being on top of the main die. The heat is therefore easily concentrated in the chip packaging area. The report said that the A20 Pro moved the DRAM to the side of the package, which is also kind of more almost industry standard, but just with a much better interconnection than previous solution, which means that the thermal pressure, it's kind of trying to have the best of both worlds, right? You want the low latency, low power consumption, short distance connection, but without the increasing nature of heat trapping. And the issue also is that with 2 nanometer and beyond, we are now getting into more and more, not even heat output, but specifically heat trapping. Because the smaller we make the transistors, and even more importantly, the smaller we make the gaps between the transistors, forget even issues like crosstalk, where you might have transistors kind of like spazzing out and kind of communicating with each other when they shouldn't, or an electron might jump from one transistor to another, right? All of that becomes an issue once we go to nodes as dense as 2 nanometer and beyond. But when we are looking at heat, when you think about heat being between those little transistors, that's now going to get worse and worse the smaller that area gets. And that, of course, will lead to even more errors. And obviously, if the heat stacks up too much, well, now you also get the issue that your chip will just operate at a temperature level at which the silicon develops more instability or even just refuses to work, right? With packaging the DRAM to the side, the thermal pressure on or near the core computing die will be reduced and the heat dissipation path will be clear. Even better, of course, that means that the RAM can now start dissipating its heat onto a separate heat spreader, right? Ideally, something like a vapor chamber, like a larger vapor chamber. Yeah, okay. For mobile phones, this may be more important than simply improving peak performance, because the iPhone's problem is often high load after a few minutes of frequency reduction. Second, LP6 or LPDDR6 is worth paying attention to as well. The 96 bus width does not seem to be particularly exaggerated, but if the LPDDR6 frequency and efficiency come up, the actual bandwidth may still be very high. Now, this is coming from a 64-bit setup and a 9600 megatransfers per second RAM. There is a way for Apple to add 66%, 2/3 more RAM speed by using 10,700 megatransfers per second memory on, of course, a 50% larger bus, right? That being said, there is a way also that Apple will use fast memory, but will clock it a little bit lower in order to make it as efficient as possible. And with that larger memory bus, and also the general improvements of LPDDR6, though granted, LPDDR6 starts at 10,700, so I don't see Apple really clocking it anywhere lower than 8533, and to be honest, not even lower than 9600. We are looking still at a big improvement. Yeah, Apple may be balancing power, area, package complexity, and bandwidth, so maybe they will not always utilize the entire bus width or something like that. So I'll try to add a few grains of salt just so that we guys do not make it the title of the video of like Apple uses increases memory bandwidth by almost 70%, right? There can be some mitigating factors for the increase to not be as high. But yes, this is happening, and we've already heard that the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 6 Pro is also going to use an LPDDR6 ready system, one that might also support LPDDR5X for logistical reasons, right? But it will also have a 96-bit wide bus, at least for LPDDR6. For LPDDR5X, because these systems are using different they use different bit widths per module. So I believe LPDDR6 comes in 24-bit modules, while LPDDR5X comes in 16-bit modules. which means on a 96-bit bus, we would be looking at 4 modules, or depending on how you package it, you could technically get away with 2 modules, which then have 2 sub-modules. But just because the system is technically 96-bit for LPDDR6 does not mean it's also 96-bit for LPDDR5X. So we already heard some of those rumors, for example, for the upcoming Medusa Halo APUs from AMD. These are rumored to go from 256-bit white bus to 384, and also to go from LPDDR5X to LPDDR6. But it will also have kind of backwards compatibility for logistical reasons for a 5X. And when used with 5X, it might not have the full 384 bits. So just as a warning, again, there is a lot here to be excited about, but I'm just not trying to look at it all through completely rose-colored glasses. And if I'm saying anything wrong, anything that's too hyperbolic, please let me know. If you were to join Apple tomorrow, what role would you want to work in? That's actually an interesting one. I think I would like to be, like, if I am realistic, I would like to be, well, okay, let's start with the most realistic one. Because of my personal background, my medical background, I would like to be an on-set doctor for Apple, like a dermatologist. But I would love to also oversee studies for them. Maybe I could work with them on cameras, taking photos of skin and analyzing it. I've done similar studies, but with specialized hardware rather than with off-the-shelf iPhones, right? But if we are talking about the actual company structure and everything like that, I would like to be a consultant to John Turnus, basically trying to give him the consumer perspective, but with still enough understanding of the industry, or at least respecting enough the complexity of the industry, that I wouldn't be giving him suggestions like double storage, double RAM every year or so, right? And don't increase costs. So I would be more realistic than that, but I would point him towards small changes that could be done to appease the nerdiest parts of the public, and I would encourage him to cut certain products from the absolute lowest end that are so compromised that I think they sometimes create a negative impression of Apple. Yeah, I've read Steve Jobs' biography, and I've read Johnny Ive's biography. So to be honest, I mostly skimmed Johnny Ive's biography. It's not that interesting. I like the Steve Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson. That one I can recommend the most. I think if it comes to what I would like to be involved with John Turnus, I think one of the first things would be gaming. Obviously, I don't have an engineering or gaming development background, but I would point him towards existing Apple solutions and Apple ecosystem capabilities, right? We are talking about stuff like the App Store, already making billions and billions of dollars and reaching millions and millions of customers. We are talking about the game porting toolkit, right? We are talking about the intense capabilities of the M5 chips, the A19 chips, right? I would point him towards why even taking $5 billion, obviously over multiple years, and investing into ports, but also into investing into the technical side of it, right? Going to companies like Capcom, going to companies like Sony, though Sony might now be out of the question because Sony does not want to do PC ports anymore. Working on stuff like anti-cheat solutions, because many games rely on stuff like kernel level anti-cheat. And I would tell them, take that money, pay for ports, pay for optimizations on the engine level, and maybe even invest in some kind of technology of your own. Like, it doesn't have to be an engine on the level of Unreal, but if it's like a very good compatibility layer in Xcode that also happens to have a nice GUI for games specifically, I think that could go a long way to do that. I'm not sure. Smart glasses with camera late 2027, maybe, but I'm not sure. I have said it on the stream before. I do not want smart glasses with camera. I only want smart glasses with an actual screen. Until then, Apple can stick them where the sun don't shine. But let's continue. So we talked about the WMCM package for the memory. We're talking about the fact that the memory is sitting on a 96-bit wide bus. This is also literally physically a benefit now of WMCM because the RAM is now to the side. You can actually create a really large area for the interconnect. Now that interconnect might not have all the advantages in terms of short distance, low latency of the previous info solution, but it will be a much larger memory bus. um, right. Okay, LPDDR6. Again, LPDDR6 has some inherent advantages. So for LPDDR5X, it will start at something like 10,700 megatransfers per second. But as I said before, it might be downclocked for efficiency reasons. Also, sometimes a too high frequency can actually interfere with stuff like latency because there's only so fast a memory controller can refresh itself. So if you go outside of that refresh window, you will actually end up disfavorably balancing the frequency of the memory controller and the RAM so they don't meet each other, right? Because imagine one works at like exactly 10,000 mega transfers per second, right? And the other works at 10,000, right? That means, well, one updates, the other updates, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Usually you'll put them in like a 2-to-1 ratio, right? So the chip updates twice in a given time, the memory updates once. That means that the chip will definitely catch it, right? But now imagine if the memory is actually a bit too fast. And now it's not twice as fast or anything. It's just 1.1x faster. That means on one cycle they meet, but then they stop meeting exactly. There's a lot of wasted time interval between them. So Apple will find a balance. I don't doubt that they can do full 96-bit, 10,700 but there's also power, of course, to consider. Simply put, not necessarily the pursuit of the widest bus, but the pursuit of a more energy-efficient bandwidth. Die size is roughly the same as the A19 Pro. That one should put it at around 100 square millimeter. Don't forget, there is still no integrated modem, whether for Wi-Fi or for 5G. So if you're wondering why something like the MediaTek chips or Qualcomm chips are larger, well, they do, for example, sometimes will have a larger GPU because they need it, because their architecture is worse than Apple's. But they will also Jesus, my brain malfunctioned for a second. But they will also integrate their modems, especially the 5G modems, directly onto the die. That can have efficiency advantages, but that's also an extra heat source that's generating and drawing power directly from the main die, which means the heat has to be dissipated from that main die. With Apple, the N1, the C1, the N2, the C2, the NX, CX chips, whatever they're going to call it, they're sitting separate from that main die. That obviously has some disadvantages for stuff like latency and potentially efficiency, but it has cost advantages and it has heat dissipation advantages. Yeah. If the authenticity is high, it means that Apple did not rely on heap area to violently increase the transistor budget. So they can, of course, increase here the transistor budget just from the higher density, which in line with the jump from N3P to A20 Pro chip would be like a 10, 15, maybe 20% increase in transistors. Probably a bit on the lower side, but don't forget, a new node will usually also allow for stuff like higher clock speeds. Architectural changes will allow for higher instructions per clock. So we do not need a larger die to give us much more performance, but through the process, architecture, packaging, and module allocation to improve performance. Exactly. And here specifically, if we are looking at even 33% more memory, that is a huge improvement to stuff like AI compute, GPU rendering. There's a lot, especially with like a new NPU on board as well. It may also mean that CPU, GPU upgrades are not necessarily particularly aggressive. That honestly means nothing. If you look, for example, at the die size between the M4 and the M5, they're not massively different, but yet the M5 has a completely different GPU architecture with improved ray tracing, more rasterization performance, support for faster memory, new neural accelerators, and all that's happening in a similar transistor / die area budget. So no, I wouldn't necessarily, like, it may mean that, but it doesn't have to be. Apparently, key resources are given to the NPU, memory systems, and package cooling. Obviously, package cooling could make stuff like the CPU and GPU perform even better, because obviously these components will be limited by how high they're clocked, and how high something is clocked will be limited by how much heat you can dissipate. So new package cooling will help with that too. And the fourth major area here is the DNPU is beefed up. The NPU beefed up is the signal facing the end side. If the NPU related area is significantly expanded, it means that Apple will continue to strengthen local AI capabilities such as picture generation, voice understanding, real-time translation, album semantics search, localization, I guess Siri search for like on-device context and stuff like that. Video processing, yeah, there's a ton. The performance narrative of the iPhone in the future may shift from how strong is the CPU, GPU to how big the model the Insight AI can run. One thing that could really benefit this iPhone, even though it's still going to be limited to 12 gigs of RAM, is the fact that if it does have hardware acceleration for FP8 or FP4, that means it will be able to use lower quantized or higher quantized, depending on your perspective, models, which means that inside the same 12 gigabytes of RAM, you'll be able to fit a better model, right? Technically, it can have more errors because of the different quantization level, but because the model will be larger, quote unquote, not in actual RAM, but in parameters, that will offset that for the most part. So we see here the general layout of the motherboard. There isn't obviously too much to gain from them. The memory does sit on the side. I'm not sure how they came to the conclusion that stuff like the NPU is necessarily much larger in relation to the overall die, but I'll guess I'll trust it in that regard. What does this say? Can I not translate? Oh, yeah. Translation from the internet. Yeah, please translate. Oh, it doesn't do that. Well, thank you very much, Weibo. You're doing it so well here. Penguin. Oh God, the website is a mess. Nah, I'm not gonna fuck with that. That's too much trouble for me. I mean, we already got to the main portion here, right? So again, we talked about so much already, right? The designs, the colors, the camera, and combined that with all previous leaks. We talked even with the camera about stuff like changes to the aperture. We talked about changes to Face ID. So now we got into the motherboard and the new WMCM packaged memory. We talked about the type of memory and the size of the memory bus. I would also suggest that it's very likely that the die size being roughly the same means we're still looking at like a 6-core CPU, 6-core GPU. There are rumors that the M6 processor will move up the GPU core count from 10 cores to 12. But don't forget, the M series chips used to have double the GPU core count of the A series chips, and that was broken just a few years ago. So it would just catch up to the A series chip. This has had 6 cores on the high end for a while. So I don't see Apple necessarily giving us more GPU cores, but could they give us a 7th GPU core or something like that? Because with a massive improve to memory bandwidth, you kind of want more cores to take advantage of it. If you just do it through clock speeds, that will be not that great for efficiency. So we'll ultimately have to see. This article also mentions the improvement to heat dissipation that would come from this kind of different DRAM setup, LPDDR RAM here. Yeah, so previous solution here with it being on top, again, has its advantages now being on the side. But there's also another big chip thing for it. Oh, here it is. Nice. Oh, nice. I don't need to open even up my own Twitter. But one thing that we see here is iPhone Pro vapor chamber is huge and extends to the top of the phone. While this is cut off, it does suggest that it's higher up on the device than on the previous generation. And smaller dynamic island, that obviously we even have a better image for that than this. But when you look actually in comparison here, iPhone 17 Pro, let's even just do the max version, right? Vapor chamber. I think Apple actually, even on the website, gives us a pretty good insight into how big this is. Yeah, oh, actually, it does. So you can see that it starts not in the middle of the device, but in below the upper 25 to 30% of the device. Meanwhile, if we look at this image, I don't need to reopen it again. Wait, or maybe I do. Maybe I closed it. Hello? Wow, now I cannot open it again. I guess I'll have to actually go back to my own Twitter. Okay, if you look actually at the device here, this suggests that it goes very close to, if not to the actual tippy top of the device. And if this is actually all the vapor chamber, right, then this is a massive expansion, because if you remember the vapor chamber that we currently have, that one is kind of almost just like this, right? It might seem a bit maybe more like this, but this is an improvement in size by like 30, 40, depending on what's on top, maybe 50% larger vapor chamber. That is a crazy increase, and I wonder what else Apple is trying to cool down here. And obviously, if we think about the chip specifically, you also now want the vapor chamber to really cover the extra RAM, so you'll need the extra space at least for that. But it seems Apple is also now doing a better job of having the vapor chamber cover more of the battery. This could suggest, for example, higher charging speeds. Maybe Apple would still keep them relatively normal to not really degrade battery health too much, but going from something like 37 watts to 45, full 50 watts, and actually keep that sustainable, that would drop the gap to like Android devices severely. I know some of them advertise like 100 watts or 120 watts, but usually they don't sustain that charging speed for even 2 minutes or something like that. And they will charge faster throughout their cycle at like 60, 70 watts than the iPhone, right? Which is still twice the iPhone speed at 37 watts. But it will not be that high as they advertise. Now, if we think about the iPhone and what they could do with it, don't forget, that's not just Apple now adding vapor chambers and keeping up with a lot of Android manufacturers, but now this is happening with an aluminum unibody device. right? Which are way better for cooling the product, which means that Apple doesn't just dissipate the heat from the vapor chamber to just glass that doesn't like heat, but actually to aluminum that very quickly will dissipate it. So Apple might go from being far behind Android manufacturers to mostly getting pretty close with the vapor chamber on the 17 Pro to absolutely mogging the living shit out of basically any Android manufacturer with a vapor chamber. And by the way, I'm not even saying that this is some ridiculously new or unheard of vapor chamber size. Even if you look at the Galaxy A series, you will find that Samsung has decently sized vapor chambers in there. Samsung has done this kind of all device coverage with VCs for a while. But combine that with an aluminum unibody device, combine that with Apple's A-series efficiency, combine that with Apple switching from a Samsung 4nm X80 modem from Qualcomm to an in-house design C2 or C2X modem. The C2 modem, by the way, is very much in those leaks, but from what I've seen, not with any actual details, but just with it exists. So we've obviously heard rumors up front that C2, at least C2 on the iPhone Pro series, will support millimeter wave, something that C1 and C1X do not support. That Apple has been apparently waiting for that before implementing their own 5G modems on the iPhone Pro series. But with that cooling, they could actually pull it off and make their Wi-Fi chips super good, their 5G chips super good, and with a slightly larger capacity for the battery and with overall more chip efficiency, they could add a full watt or two in power consumption, of sustained power consumption, give you something like a display that stays cooler longer, a game that sustains its max FPS rate for longer, right? So it's not just about peak performance, but actually sustaining it for a more meaningful amount of time. Right. Again, this is the overall setup. If you want this in high resolution, this is the article that we have seen. Yeah, okay, so I cannot work with that. I'm not a DAI analyst in that regard. But hey, if any of you are and join us on Discord, we'll keep obviously talking more over there as time goes on. So we talked now about the massive vapor chamber. We talked about the TrueDepth camera. The C2 modem, as I mentioned before. Currently, both Reuters and Apple Insider are reporting on some additional intriguing aspects of the Tata leak. This is why I might also be back on Thursday. Tomorrow I have my Kenjutsu training. We might get more and more stuff. And apparently it's not just for the iPhone 18 Pro, the A20 chip, but also the new C2 modem. But yeah, not too much detail, unfortunately. So if there's more details that comes out based on that in future days, I'll of course cover it with you. Before I see, maybe I missed something. Maybe more keeps coming out while I'm talking. Apple just announced a flurry of updates for Apple Creator Studio. Plus previewed some iOS 27 editions coming. Well, that's more comprehensive than I thought. Updates bring new integrations with Pixelmator Pro across Final Cut, Keynote, Pages, and Numbers. That makes sense because Pixelmator Pro didn't used to be an Apple app. So hopefully they will bring it to iPhone as well. Man, I really hate using the Pixelmator Classic app on my iPhone. Final Cut Pro setting new... Well, before we get to that, let's see if that... Is that... No, what else? So 9 to 5 Mac, Claude Science app for Mac. Supreme Court agrees to hear Apple appeal over Epic Games ruling. Interesting. That's something Epic definitely wanted to avoid. Okay, so nothing new here. And how about here? Supreme Court here. American Express. Okay, so let's actually... Apple might have posted that in Newsroom, right? Let's see if that's something that we can analyze. Guys, before we get to a change in topic, We've been streaming now for over 1.5 hours. Please, if you haven't yet done so, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment. You guys see, I love interacting with a lively live stream, but sometimes I do have to cover the stuff I actually promised. Otherwise, it might just be distracting for people joining, and then I talk about something completely different for way too long. But I do encourage you guys to keep chatting, and if you want to support me directly, make that comment a super chat. That helps tremendously. Thank you to Ziggy for the $10 donation today. And of course, you can also support me directly here by becoming a channel member or a supporter over on Patreon, and just find my Discord and Twitter links in the description of the channel to join over there. The leaked document confirms LPDDR5X and PCIe Gen 5 NAND for A20 Pro. Wait, Gen 5 would be a 4x increase in size, or they could use PCIe Gen 5 NAND, but on a smaller. Wait, now I have to see that. Did I? Because the LPDDR5X rumor, it could still be true, because LPDDR5X can also be 10,700 megatransfers per second. Apple can also make it 96-bit on LPDDR5X if they wanted to. So, because as I said, if Jesus Christ. If LPDDR6 comes in 24-bit modules, LPDDR5X comes in 16-bit modules, that means you can fit LPDDR5X in 96-bit or 64-bit, while you cannot fit LPDDR6 in 64-bit. You kind of have to start at 72-bit, but it seems like most companies are jumping directly to 96-bit. So let me see. A20 Pro PCIe Gen 5. News. I do not know how to search for it. LPDDR5X. Is that something new? Yeah, 6-channel. So 6-channel memory here is basically what has been rumored. And when we are talking about 6-channel memory, we would be talking about 6 16-bit channels coming out to 96-bit for LPDDR5X. Or alternatively, it could kind of be used as a 4-channel setup with 24-bit LPDDR6 modules. But I cannot find that leak that's being commented on in my Discord. And again, the articles that we're going through specifically mentions LPDDR6. Not that that would be a huge difference in the end, right? Because again, base LPDDR6 is just as fast or slow as the highest end LPDDR5X. It's very unlikely that if Apple uses LPDDR6, they're going to use 12,000 mega transfers per second right away. It would most likely be 10,700. And there is 10,700 5X. And 96-bit is 96-bit, whether it's a 4-channel 24-bit setup or it's a 6-channel 16-bit setup. But I cannot find what you're referring to. Maybe it keeps coming out over the next couple of days, and maybe you just found something on an extra source. This is why I tell you guys, let me know also in the comments if I'm missing something. But for now, I cannot find anything in that regard. One thing that I could do is I can see if like Notebook Check has posted sometimes something else about Apple, because they're quite good at these kinds of analyses. Like no, still the one massive leak article. Interesting. But while you guys can do a bit more research, I'll also do more research on Apple Creator Studio. This is a massive update that's coming out today, apparently, and Apple says Apple Creator Studio gets smarter, faster, and more connected. Update brings new integrations with Pixelmator Pro across Final Cut Pro, Keynotes, Pages, and Numbers. Even more intelligence tools in Final Cut Pro. I was almost going to ask, isn't Pixelmator Pro integrated in Logic? No, of course not. Logic is a music app. More intelligence tools, the ability to generate shapes to further customize a project, and the new producer project in Logic Pro. Okay. Apple today introduced power-packed updates to Apple Creator Studio. I wonder if they come with icon updates, because obviously they have been a hotly debated topic. App updates. Let me check about app updates on my iPad, because obviously I have stuff like Pixel. Okay, no. Final Cut seems the same. I think the keynote icon might be a bit different. There might be a bit more detail in them. Interesting. But seemingly Pixelmator Pro does not yet have an iPhone app, which is something I had really hoped for. Yeah. Requires macOS or iPadOS 26. Yeah, unfortunately. That's a bit of a shortcoming. Apple, please port Pixelmator Pro to iPhone. Would be very, very welcome for me. So, a groundbreaking collection of creative apps that built on the essential role Mac, iPad, and iPhone play in the lives of millions around the world, featuring new AI capabilities that are dynamic enough for every creative discipline. These updates make Apple Creator Studio even more connected, capable, and intelligent. Obviously, intelligence is the term Apple uses whenever they want to talk about AI features, but especially when Apple talks about creative applications and content, they do want to refrain from going all into the AI space, at least verbally, because they know it's not always that positively received over there. Users can open and customize any image placed in Keynote, Pages, and Numbers. Oh, so that's the capability that's basically being borrowed over from Pixelmator to these other apps that obviously have images, or even send a keyframe from Final Cut Pro directly to Pixelmator Pro. Logic Pro users can elevate their music making with improvements to Chord ID, or explore a new producer project from a Grammy Award-winning producer. Even more AI-powered workflow solutions. Final Cut Pro, the ultimate video creation app for Mac and iPad. And by the way, all of these AI tools, this is why we are talking about Apple giving us more memory bandwidth, more memory whenever they can, unfortunately. New neural accelerators for the GPU, improvements to even the CPU AI accelerators, because Apple has AI accelerators even for the CPU, improvements that are upcoming for the neural engine, and obviously all the memory and cache and clock speed to feed it all. Okay, yeah, I don't see any leaks in Discord to confirm the rumors you guys were talking about. Final Cut Pro enhances creative workflows with a new set of powerful AI tools like generate captions and edit detection, along with new content like creator themes with support for multiple aspect ratios, dynamic titles, and customizable backgrounds. On Mac, users also benefit from even more tools like AutoMask and enhanced match color, advanced trimming, and the ability to send frames to Pixelmator Pro. On Mac. So these parts of it are Mac exclusive. So even though Final Cut, of course, is on the iPad, it does not get at least these specific features. Leveraging the power of on-device AI, so this is not a cloud solution, not even a private cloud compute solution. Generate captions, one of the most requested features, let users automatically transcribe audio and place the resulting subtitles perfectly in the timeline. This is a feature that's massive for stuff like TikTok, basically all kinds of short form content. There are already tools that are doing this. It being basically free and then an app that people already use. Hey, this might encourage me to do more shorts. In fact, I would have started doing more content right now if my iPhone hadn't broken on the weekend. I remember my promise to you guys. It's not forgotten, I swear. Options to animate the style and customize font, color, and position give editors the flexibility to add their personal style to any project. On-device AI also powers edit detection, which analyzes rendered video and automatically splits it back into the original clips on the timeline. Analyzes rendered video, automatically splits it back into the original. Oh, okay. So if you're seeing a video with cuts, Final Cut can basically allow you to find the individual segments without you having to cut them up back. Editors can jump back into refine their edits or quickly assemble a cut down highlight clip for sharing on social media. Yeah, I thought so that would be specifically for this, without having to manually identify previous edit points. I wonder if it would work for stuff like topics almost, like visually, but I guess not, because they call it edit detection, not content detection, right? I wonder if it could like just automatically recognize where I start one of my new topics in a live stream and just intelligently cut it up into several pieces, right? Okay, so these are the subtitles that are generated, the captions, basically. Across Mac and iPad, Final Cut Pro leverages on-device AI for generative captions, a feature that automatically transcribes audio and places subtitles right in the time frame. Yep. That makes sense. Mac users can take advantage of AutoMask, a new way to isolate and refine specific elements of footage. On-device AI recognizes subjects like skin, hair, sky, foliage, and clothing with no manual tracking needed. A simple hover over a clip brings up a live preview of what has been detected, or users can choose from the list in the inspector, making it seamless to pair the mask with any color correction or effect for precise adjustments. Wait, why is this Mac exclusive? Like, I can understand making it exclusive to maybe the latest M5 hardware or something. It does seem like it would be quite AI intensive. Does it require more than 16 gigs of RAM, which is where the iPad currently maxes out? That's insane. This is a weird way to differentiate it. And AutoMask works hand in hand with Magnetic Mask, which gives editors complete control over exactly what to identify, track, and mask. Also on Mac, a reimagined match color produces more accurate and natural color matches across a wider range of footage and lighting conditions. Again, why is this Mac exclusive? That's weird, Apple. I know you like the Mac these days, but man, that's a big FU to iPad editors. Editors select a reference frame, and Final Cut analyzes shots to bring them into perfect harmony with the option to refine as needed. That is very much needed, of course, because I don't trust AI to get it 100% right. But if it can get you 90% there, and then you do some light tweaking rather than have to do everything from the ground up, that can definitely accelerate your workflow. And advanced trimming allows users to fine-tune incoming and outgoing frames one at a time. Okay, I never had much issues with that, but if it helps. But granted, my projects have never been too complicated in that regard. Users can also take advantage of meaningful updates in Motion and Compressor. Motion adds native support to keep vector graphics crisp at any resolution, along with distribution layers for dramatically faster setup of complex animations. Compressor introduces an immersive metadata viewer, 180-degree Apple projected media profile support for Apple Vision Pro, and anaglyph view for stereoscopic video. Okay, so 3D content, virtual reality content, and a metadata viewer, which I get. I'm not sure. Oh, it's an immersive one. So I guess they had one before, but it now looks better. Creatives can also take advantage of updates to Final Cut Camera, the free video capture app for iPhone and iPad. Now support for clean HDMI out, sending a pristine video signal to external monitors and recorders. Expanded ProRes support, including ProRes LT, offers more flexible options for choosing the right codec for any productions, and users can now disable digital zoom to guarantee that every frame captured is at full optical resolution. Nice changes. Now, I never edit in ProRes myself. Whenever I edit, I don't edit for the channel. But hey, ProRes LT, quite cool. Powerful new image editing and graphics tools. The power of Pixelmator Pro is now at users' fingertips any way they need it across Apple Creator Studio. Wait, but you still haven't brought it to iPhone. That's not the way you phrase it if you're not bringing it to iPhone. Final Cut Pro users can now send the chosen frame directly to Pixelmator Pro, create custom thumbnails or social media graphics, and easily drop their content back into the timeline without interrupting their flow. In Keynote Pages and Numbers, users can select any image within a document, blah, 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 and basically do the same. And they're automatically saved back in the document, and then you have it and add it for Pixelmator Pro. In Pixelmator Pro, Keynote Pages and Numbers, it's now easy to generate vector shapes to fit any objects. Users can refine their shapes as desired, and shapes are saved to a dedicated collection for user at a later time. Okay. Advanced Image Generation and Content Hub also expand to Pixelmator Pro. With image generation, users can credit and edit images using natural language. And in the Content Hub, they can browse a curated collection of premium photos, graphics, shapes, and illustrations to inspire a new design. Is that coming right now or with iOS 27, 8.8? Image generation require iPhone 15 Pro, 15 Pro Max. Yeah, it's seemingly macOS 26. It's not, you don't have to wait for that. That's interesting. Powerful image. Yeah. Keynote Pages are also adding some highly requested features for all users. Keynote gains stunning new transitions and builds. Pages on iPhone and iPads add auto-hyphenate and show invisibles for more precise editing. And Numbers makes navigating complex spreadsheets faster than ever with the ability to hide or color code individual sheets. And with iOS 27, okay, here we are now looking at changes coming in September. With iOS 27, iPadOS 27, and macOS 27, Freeform will also add the ability to generate shapes and open an image in Pixelmator Pro, in addition to introducing dark mode, folders to organize boards, and support for drawing on the Mac. I assume with like a Wacom tablet. But also, this is another confirmation for the touchscreen MacBook Pro. Yeah, okay, so we now have so much stuff pointing towards a touchscreen MacBook Pro coming, it's not even funny. Taking music creation further. Updates to Logic Pro for Mac and iPad make music creation even more intelligent, immediate, and inspiring for users. Chord ID, which I believe they've introduced only with the launch of Creator Studio on the last wave of updates. Chord ID has been rebuilt to bring even more accuracy to harmonic analysis, including extended chords and inversions, even if they are played on a distorted guitar or a slightly out of tune piano. Hey, that would be very helpful for me. I can only play distorted sounds because I'm too stupid to tune my guitar. This results in session players that quickly respond and perform chord changes with greater ease. A new producer project reveals the complete Logic Pro session behind Should and Never, produced by Chris Riddick-Tynes. I have no idea what that references. Every multi-track I mean, it's a song, I guess. Every multi-track recording, MIDI performance, and vocal take is preserved exactly as it was built, offering a rare behind-the-scenes look inside a professional session. That's actually interesting. They used to do not quite the same, but something similar with GarageBand, where they would have like lessons from artists and, well, teachers, I guess, right? And they would teach you popular songs and maybe even show you how a song is broken up in individual tracks and how you learn to edit them and stuff like that. These sims like an even higher level pro level way of doing that. For Logic Pro and Mainstage, a new granular man, they've updated every single app here. That's quite extensive of them. For Logic Pro and Mainstage, a new granular sync mode in Alchemy. Logic Pro's flagship sample. Okay, here I'm not an expert. I just don't use Logic Pro enough for any of this. Opens up into GarageBand has always been more than enough for me. Opens up entirely new dimensions of sound design. To complement this, users can explore the new granular Alchemy sound pack, which offers a curated collection of loops and presets built specifically for this new mode. Additionally, Beat Breaker expands across Mac and iPad with new filter and pan modes and intuitive randomization controls, making it easier than ever to discover fills and rhythmic variations. Okay, I really cannot speak much to that. We have the pricing, which still seems to be the same, $12.99 per month, $129 per year, or student pricing of $299 per month or $30 per year. They did manage that it's faster, but they do not say about any kind of like hardware changes. like hardware optimization changes, like being greatly accelerated by a new neural engine or something like that. So that's interesting. So I guess faster could just mean that because they're so well connected and you can now edit stuff with Pixelmator, but while still being in Final Cut and stuff like that, that this all speeds you up. Chilling with Tech, if you had to be an Android, what Android phone would you get? It really would depend on what iPhone I would have next to that. If we would just look at the traditional iPhone 18 Pro and stuff like that, I would probably have an Android foldable, whichever happens to be the best. If I happen to get an iPhone foldable, I would look into what Android has the best camera that year and stuff like that. So I would not be necessarily beholden to brands or something like that. Ideally, I would like Google to finally get their shit together and make much better tensor chips and stuff like that. But that's seemingly not happening anytime soon. So, and the other story that I did want to cover, oh, sorry for blinding you because I definitely blinded myself here, is this is coming from, wait, this isn't coming from DigiTimes, right? I thought this was coming from Instant Digital or something like that. Let me quickly see. Maybe Mac Rumors does a better job of mentioning their sources. Apple Watch redesign. Yeah, it's Instant Digital. Okay, good. Thank you. A major overhaul of the Apple Watch design is due to arrive next year with a new system for connecting bands. Again, this is something that we have heard now several times over the last decade. Apple has not yet changed the Apple Watch band connection. In all that time since the Apple Watch became a thing, they only are different based on the size you pick. So this would be a massive overhaul. Mind you, we are also expecting some kind of design change to the next Apple Watch Ultra. So would that already also get new bands, or would that only start with the Apple Watch Series 13? I'm not sure. But Instant Digital has a decent track record, so it makes sense to cover what he has to say. In a set of recent posts, the leaker known as Instant Digital linked a new claim to older rumors about an Apple Watch X model. Isn't that got front page tech some eyebrow reductions, which was set to introduce a fresh design and break compatibility with the existing watch band system. Citing a post from August 2023, the leaker reiterated that the way the band attaches to the case would change, creating internal space for a larger battery. Now, whether that results in an actually larger battery or Apple slims down the device overall by using the extra free space for the same kind of battery, but then reducing the overall volume, who knows? The leaker went on to advise that anyone planning to buy a new Apple Watch in 2027 should hold off on buying extra bands in the meantime, given that a redesigned case could leave the current attachment system behind. Again, this does not sound very confident. A redesigned case does, I mean, I understand that with how the Apple Watch works, there's a decent amount of space that's taken up by the band attachment mechanism. But I'm not sure if Apple wants to do that. Yeah, in 2023, Mark Gurman talked about a new band attachment system, an iPhone that I'm not even sure, like Apple Watch 10, I guess because, 10 years old in 2023, but it was supposedly more similar in design to like an iPhone 12 with hard edges rather than rounded ones, but we got an even rounder Apple Watch instead. Yeah. New magnetic band attachment system, a thinner case. Now, micro LED display, I don't think that's happening anytime soon. There have been some rumors that micro LED will start on the Apple Watch, but there's been no concrete timeline in sight. I mean, late next year for a first single model Apple Watch that gets it, could it be possible? I definitely would welcome it, because hopefully that means that a micro LED iPhone is just a couple of years away after that. But we cannot be sure. Again, these are based on old leaks, and obviously micro LED hasn't happened in all years since then, even though micro LED obviously isn't beholden to a new design. It's just a better screen technology. Yeah. The timing lines up with how Apple has historically refreshed the Apple Watch design. The original watch through the Series 3 shared one design, Series 3 through Series 6 shared one design, and Series 7 through 9 shared the third. So now we have 10. That would be then 11. Hey Siri, stop. Then 11, then 12, and that would be 13. So yeah, that makes sense. Matching the timeline, which honestly is not something I even considered. Apple Watch design changes have been so subtle over the years that it's kind of hard. You sometimes forget where exactly a new design started and where it was slightly changed. It's not quite the same as it is with iPhones. Yeah, the leaker previously said that the redesign would not appear until 2028, which I mean, that is late 2027. That is close to that. The year after the debut of the 20th anniversary iPhone, which then again, we also know that the 20th anniversary iPhone is not anywhere as crazy as some people made it out to be. Thankfully, I don't want it to be like 360 degrees wraparound glass or something like that and break all the benefits that we just got from the aluminum unibody that was introduced on the iPhone 17 series. Just give it like 3D slightly curved glass on the corners and that's fine. Angelica, one of our Mark Pro Max members, saying my streams are fascinating. Well, thank you very, very much. Yeah, obviously, Digitimes have said shit. Everyone has said shit over the time. I mean, we only need to ask John Prosser from Front Page Tech and what that has resulted in. But we are now 2 hours into the stream. Let me check if there are any... Oh man, there is more. Starting today, a mobile version of the popular game show Family Feud is available on Apple Arcade. And they mostly have Plus games, which means these are existing titles, but they're ad-free, and they're including in Apple Arcade, Dungeon Crawler Plus, Creatures of the Deep Plus, Pocket City 2 Plus, and Droid. So nothing crazy. We also get third public betas of iOS 26, but for new betas of iOS 27 and all the other 27 releases, we'll have to wait until next week. And maybe I'll actually take some time in future streams to talk about the Apple Epic fight, maybe once we get more hearings from the Supreme Court. In a statement to Mac Rumors, Apple said the court's decision was welcome news, so at least you know how to interpret today's news. This is an important question of law. Not that you should be beholden to what Apple says. I mean, now you know what Apple thinks. This is an important question of law, and we are pleased the Supreme Court will hear our case. The Supreme Court has released a ton of decisions recently, most of them actually quite good. So while I am not the greatest fan of the conservative majority over there, it is not as bad as some people make the Supreme Court make it out to, as they make it out to be. But it seems like that's about it for... okay, there's another stupid court thing with Apple. And then some affiliate links. Yeah, obviously we talked about stuff like, this doesn't look dark cherry to me. This just looks like gray. There's too little color in here to analyze this. Let's see if there's anything on 9 to 5 Mac still, because it's been another half hour. And I hate it when news drop the second my video ends, but it does seem like we are mostly at an end here. Again, also stuff, unfortunately, that is included in the leaks, but has not yet been too detailed, like the C2 modem, I cannot talk too much about yet. So... I also still cannot see any proof, even while researching on my iPad, that it might use LPDDR6, 5X than 6. If anything, my suspicion is that the new phone could definitely use still 5X, but as a downgrade almost. And one thing that I could see being based on that is that they could use LPDDR6 on the A20 Pro, but then the base A20 chip still uses a 4-channel setup with, but instead of using 24-bit modules, uses 16-bit modules. It would probably require some Frankensteining, but then with that, it uses LPDDR5X rather than 6, and probably slightly slower at 9600 versus 10700. We've seen these kinds of clock speed differences even on the latest generation. For example, the A19 Pro and the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max, they use 9600 mega transfers per second. The A90 Pro with one GPU core disabled on the iPhone Air uses 8533 memory, but still 12 gigabytes of it, while the base A20 chip with 5 GPU cores max, there's just not more on the die, that one uses 8 gigabytes of 8533 memory. Or very likely they're using 9600 mega transfers memory, especially the iPhone Air, but it's just getting downclocked over there. Yeah, but it seems like we've covered basically anything we could cover here. It's crazy how much. I'm not even sure how I'm going to add timestamps to this kind of video here. There's just so much. Any check for more leaks over here? No. Okay, good. Yeah, and also like one of the funny things is that Android Authority has actually been one of the websites to cover these leaks pretty extensively right away. So respect on them on covering the competition in quite the in-depth way. Let's see if there's anything else that they might have posted, because apparently they're faster in this regard than Apple-centric websites. News. Oh yeah, there are also new leaks for the Galaxy Z Fold 8, but honestly, I'll try to reserve that information for some other stream, just to make sure that we have more stuff in future. So this is 7 hours ago. Yeah, I think we've covered everything there was to cover for today. Guys, we have been at it for over 2 hours, and I think the amount that we've covered is quite crazy. I'll try to add timestamps, but this is generally a video where I might actually, for once, recommend you just watch the whole thing, and maybe you skip something like the Apple Creator Studio portion if that's not to your liking. But everything else was quite cohesive. It was part of one massive leak, and it concerned one iPhone type, iPhone 18 Pro, and its main chip type, A20 Pro. So again, in future videos, if we have more on the next series of N chips or C modems or anything else like that, I'll cover that. I also want to cover Samsung's upcoming devices like the Galaxy Z Fold 8 and the Z Fold 8 Ultra. But I also need a bit of a rest, so hopefully I'll be back on Thursday. If not, you might have to wait for that until Sunday because my mom comes to visit this weekend. We haven't seen each other in a while, and miss her actually quite a lot. Yeah, but this has been a very eventful stream. Obviously, the generous donation by Ziggy and so many comments from you guys on so many different topics. Thank you so much. Before you leave, a reminder, don't only post in the live chat, but also post in the regular comment section. It helps a lot with the algorithm. You can find the link to my Discord and my Twitter in the channel description. You can become a channel member right here on YouTube or supporter over on Patreon. Shout out to our MarkCheck Pro members, Angelica, Steve, Max, and Jonathan. And of course, just let me know what you would like to see me cover next, and I'll catch you soon. This is MarkTech, tuning out.